Betsy Ross and Thomas Paine and the Ass of the Globalists, back here from the American Intelligence Media. Thomas, you were on fire with that last audio, and I had to cut you off because we had reached the 50-minute mark. So I want you to continue on. I know you have so much more to say. You left off with George Soros.
Yes, and there's a lot to be explained there, because you'll be very confused if you hear Rudy Giuliani, even when he's handling these documents and he's being interviewed and he's talking about the documents that were just dropped in his lap, right? Well, those documents were from a group called the Ukrainian Anti-Corruption Group. Well, those documents, first off, we need to frame this. An anti-corruption group in Ukraine? Which corruption group? I mean, they're all corrupt, okay? So let's ask the question, who paid for that? That is a George Soros-sponsored group. Now, some will say, no, it was not. Yes, it was. 47% of the Ukrainian Anti-Corruption Organization is just like the one we were pointing out, the one here in America, the OCCRP, is a Soros-funded group. It's just that he funds it under a group called Renaissance International, I believe. It's just one of his many groups. So the point is that there was so much corruption going on that when Paul Manafort got the president elected, and then there was the Orange Revolution, Viktor Yanukovych, it was rather miraculous. And then he got, of course, deposed because of some complete nonsense, which was, again, George Soros, NGOs, as well as New Democracy and all these different CIA groups, which work, remember, the CIA oftentimes is directed by the State Department. So, the group that we're talking about, the Ukrainian Anti-Corruption Group, the majority of its money came from the U.S. State Department. Imagine that the U.S. State Department, with Hillary in it, and John Kerry, and Jonathan Weiner, and Victoria Nuland, the most corrupt people you can possibly imagine, they're going to fund an anti-corruption group in Ukraine. And as we know, $4.7 billion was spent trying to make sure that the Party of Regions would stay in power, the party of basically the Nazi Party. So Paul Manafort, from the beginning, was targeted by Alexandra Chalupa, who was on the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. She was the one who came up with the idea, really, of the smokescreen of Russian hacking of the DNC. So she went back to Ukraine and she twisted a lot of arms. And one of the arms she twisted are the very people who were in that George Soros-sponsored group. Now remember, this was the time of Obama, Hillary Clinton, and later John Kerry. This was when wild, wild west diplomacy of the State Department, where emoluments was the cry of the day. It was the clarion call. Everyone was trying to get whatever they could. We know this happened in Iran with John Kerry and the 1,500 Iranian spies who came in. Aziz told us this again and again and told us who it was. It's happened everywhere. Everywhere that the Democrats can go where there's a war or there's a problem, they then find out where there's cracks in the system and how they can make money. That's what Joe Biden did in Ukraine. That's why he spent so much time there. Why would they care who the president of Ukraine is? The only reason is because of the pipeline we mentioned before. 40% of the GDP of Ukraine comes from that pipeline. So they were basically jacking the Russians again and again. I've mentioned this before in tapes, but it's not been mentioned for a while. The Ukrainians, through the corruption, because Viktor Yanukovych would not be corrupt, and he wanted to do a deal with the Russians, they overthrew him with the first George Soros-sponsored color revolution called the Orange Revolution. So then what happened? Then they started, when they got their person in power, Poroshenko, what happened then? They started jacking around the price, saying, no, we're going to jack up the price, because for a while it slowed down, we're going to jack it up. So Ukraine was jacking up the price to just do nothing except allow the Russians to transport the oil in the pipeline across Ukraine. Well, as we mentioned before, when Obama put sanctions on, then that was at the end. Before that, there was then another chance for Paul Manafort to come, and Viktor Yanukovych was then put back in power as the president of Ukraine. And then there was another color revolution, the Maidan Revolution, which, oh, by the way, Igor Parashinsky, he was there in the crowd of the Maidan Revolution when people were actually shot and killed, so that they could kick Victor out again and put their guy back in again.
Wasn't there something you said in the last video, and then afterwards you said you needed to fine-tune that or add some more clarification to it? Do you remember?
Yes, I said that this organization was funded, the Ukrainian anti-corruption organization was funded by a number of different groups, by the rogue CIA, by George Soros's NGO called Renaissance International, which is basically the Open Society, by the State Department. And I said, and probably Germany and Italy also, and Britain, of course, but then I forgot to mention the Netherlands. And so in the break, I went and did some more research and found, yes, in fact, certainly, Netherlands has supported this same exact organization. Why? Anytime you want to know about corruption, create a supposed not-for-profit organization to try to root out corruption. What are you really going to do? You're going to find the roots of corruption. You're going to find who are all the bad players, and then a George Soros is going to come in, and he's going to say, thank you very much for finding all of that. Now I'm going to take economic advantage of that. I may align with them, I may destroy them, I may buy their companies. It doesn't matter. So what was happening in Ukraine when Giuliani said Soros-connected company, he needed to be much clearer. I thought he was saying that George Soros had a stake in Burisma, the oil company that Hunter Biden and how come we're not mentioning John Kerry's son, Christopher Hines? Why did Schweizer's book come out, a year and a half, 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
And he's been put an editor on Breitbart. He's been given all these awards. Everybody
Yeah, but that way they can put limits on what he then can publicly talk about. So obviously they want to protect Chrissy Hines.
Because he didn't go any further, and he could have. And I wondered why he didn't, because all this information we're telling you is easily found. So why did Schweitzer stop at a certain place with his book Empires?
I know people won't like it, but he's limited. Hang out. They do that. They'll tell you the truth all the way to a certain point. Then they stop, and then they don't take you all the way, either because they are not good researchers or they're being handled by someone who doesn't want to take you that far. But I have a question.
And then Clinton Cash, same thing.
Same thing.
Bad job of researching, got all this press. He's now considered a conspiracy theory. Everybody says, oh, no, that's been debunked. And Hillary loves saying that. Professionals all over the world have already debunked that.
It's just a form of propaganda in its own way. But I want to ask you, we've walked this overthrow back to the United Kingdom and Britain. And I would like to know, refresh our memory on how the Brits are going to be involved in this whole Ukraine thing as it unfolds.
Well, it has to do with oil and pipelines, and the Nord Stream 1, and then the pipeline coming, out of Russia into Ukraine, into Europe. And so Britain and France started doing their twisted deals with Iran, because that's where they were planning to get another pipeline, which nobody wanted to acknowledge was being built. But then China and Russia came into Iran and basically kicked Britain and France out. So now Iran is saying to Britain and France, if you don't get us back into this deal and stops Trump's sanctions on us, we're not giving you any oil. So what did they do? They did the runaround, the way to get around the sanctions, $400 million in lump sum payments directly to Iran so they could continue the same nonsense that John Kerry had already done with giving them $150 billion.
So the Brits are kind of in a tough position here.
They're in a terrible position, because they can't even admit that Angela Merkel has basically ripped them all off by having her own private deal with the Russians through Nord Stream 1, and probably soon will have a separate deal any minute with Nord Stream 2, because it is finished. But the Russians were smart. They have 3 different ports that they've taken the pipeline to, so they can get around the Germans. The German port is one of them. But the Nord Stream 1 is definitely still the big energy provider of Europe. And so the European Union is being basically lied to by Angela Merkel. And that's what so much of this is about. It's about the lies of the people trying to get their piece of the pie because they believe they're politicians, and that's just the way that it works. And we described a minute ago, that when you are a Democrat, anytime there's any suffering or misery or war, you go straight to that country, and against the law, against the Logan Act, you start promising everything to people who are then going to make donations to either the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or Arabella Advisors or these other groups that we've mentioned. But one way or the other, it's just disturbing. As a matter of fact, I just want to point out that the person who runs the recent whistleblower attack on Trump, the very person, Kessler is his name, works for the McCain International Institute.
Oh, you have to be kidding.
You can't get any more corrupt than that. Now, what did McCain do?
They don't think we know out here.
McCain demanded that the Russians give him $1 million in 2 different letters during his presidential campaign. He believed that he was in the position to tell the Russians what to do. And in fact, that's exactly right. Because when you say Ukrainian, there's no Ukrainian who wasn't probably a Russian. And even if they were, then they're probably not in great political power. So, and as we pointed out before, all these oligarchs, the Ukrainian oligarchs, no. They're Russians, or they're Israelis, or they're citizens of the United States, or of Britain, or of the Netherlands, or all over the place. Why do they do that? So they don't have to pay any taxes. But if you don't pay Putin before you take your money to the offshore account, Putin is going to do what he did to Bill Browder's lawyer, Magnitsky. Now, Bill Browder, this American, went in and ripped him off for literally the Heritage Capital Management, the number 1 Western investor in Russia, Bill Browder, didn't pay any taxes in America, went to Britain. And then he gets mad because his lawyer gets locked up and because they stopped doing business with him. Well, who did he think he was? He was an American sitting on Gazprom's board. That's disgusting. How can this be? Dual citizenship? No, we need to stop this. That's just globalism gone insane. So, what was really happening with Soros was just backing the organization in Ukraine. But Soros was involved in taking out Russia twice and in 14 separate color revolutions, 2 of them happening in Ukraine. We have one in America called the Purple Revolution. Still, George Soros. We've explained that in the previous tape. But what is interesting is that Ukraine blew up in the face of the Democrats because they thought that lawlessness had come to town and they could do whatever they wanted with this little satellite, country of Russia that happened to be the oil provider of Europe. And so they thought, of course they're going to place their people in key positions there. But what they didn't plan on was that Hunter Biden and Christopher Hines would go insane and do a deal with the Chinese. Do they think for 1 minute the Chinese will ever protect them or in any way be honest in a deal, or that the deal wasn't with the Chinese Communist Central Committee? You'd have to be insane. But then Hunter Biden obviously is insane, exactly like his father. And Christopher Hines, well, his dad is insane because in front of everybody, he continues to violate the Logan Act and violate the emolument clauses and every other thing you can imagine, being a treasonous, seditious person still working directly for Iran. That's a fact.
And don't forget, every time you bring up John Kerry's name in the swamp, I think of that picture of him as a young man in grade school, maybe he was in high school, sitting right next to his good buddy, Robert Mueller.
Yeah, absolutely. And people may think that it is always a conspiracy theory to say the George Soros funded group. No, $32 billion in America alone that we know of that he has given to these organizations with money that he stole by not paying taxes on it here in America. And yet nothing happens. He's the biggest criminal on the face of the earth. So what did George Soros have to do with Ukraine? Both of the color revolutions. But he was not involved in Burisma, which really threw me for a loop when Rudy Giuliani insinuated that. He was involved in the Ukrainian anti-corruption organization, which, in fact, literally, because it's gone back and forth, waffling from one side to the next, the stuff that was laid in Giuliani's lap at this moment happens to be the enemies of Trump.
So, can I change the subject? Google, Oracle, and Facebook. What's up with that? you got Google and Oracle battling over who has a source code, and you've got Mark Zuckerberg coming out in a leaked audio from the propaganda site The Verge that they actually expect us to believe is a leak.
First off, Google, as a monopoly, should be closed down, and when they do their antitrust action on them, if they do, they can go all the way back to Oracle and pay Oracle off. They can go all the way back to the other companies they've absorbed and disassociate them, but they need to disgorge them. They need to take all of their wealth and stop playing games. So this is a good move. This is a very good move because it shows that if you steal someone else's code, it doesn't matter how big you are, Google or Alphabet, and that's the reason Alphabet was created. It's a British tactic where you create a company you call the mother company of a company that created it.
Well, is this promising news for Leader Technologies?
That's where I'm going with that.
Okay, keep talking then.
And just like the IP was stolen from Micron by China, it is a crime, and now it looks as if we have a president who is going to prosecute them. So this was standard operating procedure. The bigger the lawyers and the bigger the company they're representing, the more you win in all of these decisions. Now it looks as if, not going to work that way, that Oracle is going to win this. And when they win this, it's going to set the dominoes falling. Because we all know, well, what happened was they said all that had to happen, was for them to say, show me your original source code. And as soon as you do, and I show you that you stole it from us, then everything from that point on, we get a piece of. And that's the way that it should be. Now, this has happened many, many times in America, and the bigger the company, the more blatant it is, and basically this is the antitrust monopoly issues. I call it racketeering. It is not just antitrust or monopoly. So, with Facebook, these stupid meetings that Mark Zuckerberg have been having have not been leaked. That is the best PR he can do. Believe it or not, listen to them, and as you're vomiting, because he's got the most minuscule brain you can ever imagine.
Maybe
I swear.
He needs to learn to code.
If he wasn't a special ed student, then the standards were not the way they were when I was a superintendent. He's got an IQ less than 70. All you have to do is listen to him. And he came out. You want to know the reason that it's in pieces? And the reporting is in pieces? That's all he could remember. Remember, he can't talk for 2 hours. His brain can't hold that. And not only that, look at what he said.
All right, but what's the agenda there for releasing this? Okay.
It was stupid stuff. And what you saw was nothing more than a staged publicity stunt. For whom? For the people who want Facebook to be broken into pieces for monopoly and antitrust instead of for the racketeering and the crimes they've committed. I loved it that everybody was lying on the floor.
Yeah.
Lying on the filthy, dirty floor.
Well, that's the urban myth of, the cool kid from Harvard knew how to code this brilliant thing.
Yeah, and there he is in his T-shirt just going, I don't know.
Okay, that's not a good look for you.
But that's the way he spoke. He spoke as if he was a junior high school student who couldn't pass junior high. Now, what did he say in those meetings? He said, I'm going to fight it to the end. If Elizabeth Warren comes out and they want to break us up, I'm going to fight. Wait just a minute. A few weeks ago, you said you have to take us over. We're out of control. We don't know what we're doing. This has to be, you can break this up. This is a monopoly. Use your antitrust on us. Use the FTC. Use the FEC. Use everybody on us. But just for God's sake, take us over. That's what he and all his people said weeks ago. Now he says, I'm going to fight it. I'm going to take it to the mat. He doesn't even know what that means. But anyway, he says he's going to fight it. He's going to fight Elizabeth Warren. She's not going to win. You're so stupid. You don't even know what you're saying, Mark, of the Zucker
Well,
beast.
they're panicked because they want it to be broken up, and Trump hasn't, at least from what we see, nothing's happened. So now they have to be very concerned that maybe he's listening to the recommendation that they be disgorged and that their original source code be produced.
Trump shook his hand in the Oval Office.
And he knew.
And the pictures, as I said before, were from the waist up because he was peeing his pants. Because he told Mark of the Zucker Beast that he has the code. Exactly as Oracle just told Google, tough luck, show us the original code. Oh, you don't have it, do you?
Isn't it great?
Do. So that's what he told Mark the Zuckerbeast. And Mark then went back and his handlers told him, change everything you said 2 weeks ago. But it doesn't matter to Mark, he can't remember. And so then he simply said what he was told, but he had to keep walking out of the meeting and walking back in with the new topic because he can only handle being told and parroting a certain amount because his brain is so small. And the things that he said were so stupid that it is 100% proof that he has never ran that company for one day. And as I have said from the beginning, everyone who works with him knows that he did not show up to work for up until recently, and even then, every time he does, he screws everything up.
All right, well, what's going on then with the encryption keys that Hillary is supposed to control with that committee? You think anything's happening in that area?
That's a very good question. So
that's what I'm here for.
So with Trump having the Miller Act notice and having the original code and can say to all of those in the downstream, now you're going to license with me and I'm not going to allow you to spy on people, surveil, target, attack, blah, blah, blah. Yes, he will do the same the moment that but he first is not going to take over the crypto keys. No.
Not yet?
No, he's not going to upset anything. He's not going to upset the stock market. Why? Because he's making it all work for the first time. And he knows of the corruption. He knows what the U.S. Fed's doing. He knows what the central banks are doing. He's controlling the U.S. Treasury. But anyway, so what he's actually doing here is he's setting them up because he can't let FANG just be hammered by the government without the stock market crashing and people's 401ks there.
Yes.
So what he's going to have to do, when he tells everyone in America to get out of your 401ks because FANG is going down, he already warned us he was going to do that was going to happen. When he warns everybody it's going to happen, get out, folks. He's looking after your best interests. Because why? FANG is going to die, all of them. First off, Mark Zuckerberg is a fake, and Facebook is a fake. And so is Google, so is Alphabet, so is Amazon,
Netflix,
so is
all of them.
Anything to do with scalability. So that means any live streaming.
Basically, if you can log into your computer and use a login for anything, that is Leader Technology software right there.
Getting on the internet at all requires that. Now, the crypto keys, here's the deal. The deal is the Shanghai Free Zone. Okay? That's what it's all about. Hillary moved in trust into Axiom and all these other different companies that went to Shanghai. And then she moved it back to California under the auspices of Richard C. Walker and Broadcom. That's ridiculous. Why did she do that? Because she actually found out that the Shanghai Free Zone was a complete fraud. It's another Chinese fraud. She actually fell for the Chinese bait. This is the person who has been poisoning her since the time she became an active paid member of Walmart's board, the Walton family board. In other words, every piece, and let's remember,
but she
Walmart,
sure looked good on her dry run this weekend.
Yeah, do you see all those weapons that China just showed us?
Oh, okay.
Hillary paid for those. That was Walmart. Okay? So what we're seeing now is that they had tricked Hillary, and I believe that they've poisoned her, as they have been doing now for thousands of years. Anyone who didn't know this old trick, never eat anything that the Chinese give you to eat. They've given us plastic rice recently. They've given us radioactive children's food. They've given us radioactive children's equipment. You name it. If they're not actively trying to kill us, they certainly are unconsciously trying to kill us. So I believe that Hillary was controlled by them, and she was trying to work out of the Shanghai Free Zone with her crypto keys. And what she found out is she had to use their systems. And their systems go straight to the Communist Central Committee. So Hillary no longer had the ability in an intranet to control her internet crypto keys to her own satisfaction. So she moved from Shanghai back to California. Now, she's trying to move everything out of China because Trump has defeated China. China's already defeated, y'all. He's already defeated him. That's the reason he says, don't worry, everything's going great. It is. Every country in the world is getting out of their deals with China because they've tried to strong on them with the One Belt, One Road noose around their neck. You can't do business with China. Anyone who tries fails, always has. No one has ever done business. Even the British Even the British, who are, by the way, you notice, why aren't the British speaking about Hong Kong? Why aren't the British saying anything about China and the tariffs? Why aren't the British defending Taiwan when China has said they're basically going to militaristically take over Taiwan? Because Taiwan was doing the manufacturing for America. At one point, 51% of common household goods came from Taiwan, not China. And remember, before that, it was Japan. So what is going on here? Well, the Brits can't control China. Nobody can. We shouldn't be doing any trade with them. We shouldn't be doing any trade with anyone that doesn't reach most favored nation trading status. So there's been some big victories recently with the World Trade Organization, but for instance, with Ukraine, that whole nonsense with Manafort, World Trade Organization, the World Bank, $27 million missing on a ledger that Alexander Chalupa just magically produces from who? Oh, that was the Ukrainian anti-corruption organization that gave that to her. Isn't that lovely? So who was it that really stole the $27 million? Probably the Podestas. Don't know for sure. Or maybe there was none. It doesn't matter. We know that the entire Russian dossier was centered, its focus and its research was centered in Ukraine, and it was centered on the very people that Joe Biden got reelected a second time, the Nazis, the Party of Regents in Ukraine, and that's who Alexander Chalupa went to work with, Joe Biden's good buddies over there. And that's who helped produce Christopher Steele, who really had very little to do with that dossier except that his good buddy Bruce Orr was his best friend, and that Bruce Orr got it into Andrew Weissman and Ahmad Zainab and all the rest of the evil people that were running the National Security Division of the Department of Justice and working with the State Department, because they all had this dossier. They had one installment that was asked. Christopher Steele was asked to write it by Bruce Orr. And so he wrote one, and Bruce thought it was so great that he goes, okay, give me more. So he wrote, 13 of them? Each one of them $50,000 a piece that was paid for by the FBI starting in March of 2016. We've told you all this. That was directly linked to the fact that they had to get everyone's attention on Russia, not Ukraine. And anytime there's any issue with Ukraine, you say they're Russians, or if they're Russians, you say they're Ukrainians. Or they're actually citizens of England. And so we pointed that out. That's what was going on. So I was waiting literally until sanctions were put on Burisma and Hunter Biden got kicked out because Trump outsmarted all of them. I was expecting Hunter Biden to become a dual citizen of Ukraine, China, Russia, and America, along with Christopher Hines, of course, and his dad, John Kerry, and of course we already know that Hillary Clinton might as well be a true Russian and a true Chinese, because she's helped them more than she's helped America.
Well, I think that the big highlight here is something that the media is never going to report on, and I don't know who is going to, so let's do a victory lap. Trump defeats China.
Oh, Trump has already defeated China, yes. And the reason we know this is because why? Henry Kissinger wanted to meet with him again. Henry Kissinger...
Oh, you mean recently?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I bet he's...
Oh, yes. Henry Kissinger asked for a secret meeting, and Trump said no.
Good!
And what was that about? Because who was the first person Trump went to see when he became
It was
empowered?
Henry Kissinger.
And what did Henry say? America is no longer the world power. China is. So, Trump, I can work some deals for you. I can get your Trump Towers in Peking, wherever you want. And Trump said, go jump in a lake. So the next time Henry came to his office and Trump was there, allowed the cameras in, and he ignored him. He barely talked to him. In other words, where did Steve Bannon go after he jumped ship with Trump? China. And where is James Breyer, the man who is behind all these DARPA, social networking, IBM Eclipse Foundation theft, and now Open Powers, which is the new IBM Eclipse Foundation 2.0, which everyone who has anything to do with China has to be part of Eric Schmidt and James Breyer's Open Powers group, which they act like it's a open source group. No, it's not. You either do it their way and you're completely controlled, or you don't do business with China, period. So that's the reason Hillary had to move out. She had to get back in good old US of A, California, so that she could, right there with her good buddy, the arms dealer, good old Igor, and with Schiff and Pelosi, just, sit around and plan their next machinations, because Ukraine is still so messed up that these oligarchs are going insane, and that's the reason they've had 2 color revolutions. They still don't have control of their country. They still have 2 provinces in the oblast Donetsk, and the other one, I can't pronounce its name. These are great names. But anyway, in the oblast, there's 2 regions. They still got the fact that the Ukrainians don't want to be ruled by these Nazis. They'd rather go back to being ruled by even Putin and his mafia oligarchs, rather than have the fact that they can't control their economy. Why? Their economy crashed because Obama put sanctions on the Russians, and that caused the 40% decrease of the GDP of Ukraine overnight. And because they all expected Trump to raise them, and he didn't, he's letting Ukraine just steam in its own juices, because it is a complete mess. It's just like what happened after George Soros went into the USSR and basically economically dismantled it. And the same thing happened with the Bush Vulcans with Russia. And now what we're seeing is Putin sitting back laughing because he simply diverted the pipelines to Nord Stream 1. And as soon as they open, he's happy to pay them the rates that they want. Why? It's not his oil. It's Kazakhstan's oil, and Turkmenistan gets their piece of the pie. So whether it's liquid petroleum or whatever, gas, whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He gets a piece because it comes through Russia. And so for him, that's nothing more than a little tax. He owns Nord Stream, and Nord Stream isn't going away, and it's on the bottom of the ocean, and it is totally controlled by him, really, when it comes down to it. So you're not going to stop the nonsense in Ukraine, but what happened was, and I want to point this out, I didn't make this clear distinction earlier. When Trump put sanctions on Burisma, that was a long time ago. That was before Zelensky came to power. Okay? So Trump already took care of this situation. He already knew fully about it. We know that Rudy Giuliani had all these materials in his possession showing all the corruption in Ukraine, including the Bidens, including Hillary Clinton, don't forget, including Soros, including the 2 revolutions, the Soros-generated color revolutions. He had all of that. So what did he do? He set them up. And the reason that it had to go into a special type of computer after he had the conversation with Zelensky is because Zelensky brought up missiles. Anytime that happens, it's classified. Well, it's no big deal. He said that out in public, so Trump could take that. He knew that that was the best one to declassify. And he also knew that this organization had already called people in to turn Trump in. And he already knew. Do you think Trump's ODI didn't tell him? Do you think they didn't tell Trump that they changed the whistleblower form? That's why Trump says, I want everyone involved in the whistleblower form being changed. I want everybody involved who we talked to that got this supposedly firsthand. I want everybody involved with second and third hand, and I want this person basically to reach the consequences they deserve, which is they broke all protocols by not reporting to their inspector general, going to Adam Schiff first. Adam lied. Adam, of course, met with Michael Cohen. He met with everybody. Felix Sater. He met with anyone he was interviewing. He did it all as a setup. Well, that's what the whistleblower is. It's another setup, but they've changed the rules. Don't be surprised if Adam Schiff says, oh no, we've already interviewed the whistleblower and we have the transcript, but we're not going to redact it. That's what's probably going to happen if he gets his way. Plus, he can't really do an inquiry out of the Intel Committee. He can only point out crimes. So he's trying to point out the overt crimes of the Intel community for the Ukrainian supposed Intel breach or manipulation, quid pro quo, basically emolument, basically wrongful use of your office. Well, that's not going to happen. And the Judiciary Committee has ground down to the disgusting Nadler, basically everyone wanting him and Schiff kicked out. If they do not do an ethics investigation on those 2 people, and notice how Cummings Elijah Cummings isn't stupid. He's backed off. And they had 2 other committee heads who were trying to do this. Because why? Impeachment instead of election. Because they can't win. They know they're going to lose. And the most important point of all, which now comes to the fore, which we've been saying for 2.5 years, the criminals involved are being shown to be who they are. So Adam Schiff, who gets money from Pasternak, Igor Pasternak, $100,000 came to him. Pelosi too, $100,000 for their campaigns, directly from a Ukrainian. Hello, he's actually Kazakhstan, Russian, Ukrainian, a foreign agent who donated to our elections. Oh yes, it's quite standard. And so Oleg Deripaska's donations and Browder's donations and Blavatnik's donations, all of these are now coming to the fore because they no longer can hide behind their super PACs. They no longer can hide behind, like George Soros. He was called out for some of what he was doing in 2016, 2018, even more. And now in 2020, it's going to be even more because we know the groups, we know what they're doing, actions being taken at the government level to stop it, the squelching of news, the Eric Schmidt's digital news service, the Cambridge Forensic Analytic Group, which the group that is doing what they call the AI truth searches for not only Facebook, which there was a $1.5 million contract given by the Atlantic Council and George Soros to Facebook. Nobody wants to talk about that. That is called foreign interference in our government. And we need to consider George Soros anything but an American, and then he would be a foreign actor, and he would be, if he was not an American citizen, he would be considered to absolutely be the leader of this coup of Donald Trump, because we can see that his money goes back to all the organizations that are the outer voice, that are virtue signaling for the intelligence community and the globalists and the senior executive service members, oftentimes the same, who were behind all of this. And we're seeing it piece by piece come out. Be patient, folks. Be patient. Seeing John Durham and Bill Barr in Italy, and knowing that Pompeo is going to go talk to them, probably about Joseph Mifsud's testimony to the Italian government, that will be exculpatory evidence enough to get anybody that Robert Mueller tried to hang out to dry out of jail. That will be the out of jail free card, because that will make the entire special counsel abnegated. And you can do that. You can abnegate the whole thing, and then the 17 other charges will simply be dropped. And some of those are against, they're trying to include Trump in. So what we're seeing now is the possibility that if Bill Barr even does his job 50%, if John Durham does his job 50%, we're going to see the underbelly of what they call the deep state, which we call the shadow government. And it is right there looking at the same people that we've been telling you about for 2.5 years. So keep up the good work. Ukraine Gate could be the straw that broke the camel's back. Let's hope so, because British Gate, the coup against Trump, once we find out the true origins, it's going to include British Gate, it's going to include the British, it's going to include the Five Eyes, it's going to include Italy, it's going to include Germany, Holland, Australia, Canada, and the shadow government here in America. And when that happens, that is the reason why we have seen the most unprecedented exodus from the Senate and from the House that I've ever heard of in American history. Why? Because those are the people who aren't all that corrupt yet. But what you're not going to see is one single long-tenured, long-lasting, old, decrepit, paid-off senator or representative leave, because they're all defending the corrupt system that has made them mega millionaires.